All attempts to end the fighting in Sudan seems to be failing, and today the forces of two rival generals fought intense street battles in the Sudan's capital Khartoum, according to witnesses, as the warring parties ignored appeals for an end of Ramadan ceasefire. In other words, they were supposed to have 5-day ceasefire to celebrate the end of Ramadan, otherwise known as Eid-el-Fitr. But they have not accepted. In other words, that failed. So they are still fighting. And more than 400 people have been killed so far. And civilians are part of that 400. And more than 4,000 others have been wounded. And hospitals in this capital city, Khartoum, have been overwhelmed by the number of casualties and injured people being brought to the hospitals. So you can imagine the scale of this fighting, because all this happened under the span of a few days, less than 1 week, right? Because since the fighting erupted on Saturday last week, this past Saturday, between forces loyal to Sudan's army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and his deputy, Mohammed Hamdan Daglo, the commander of the powerful paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, otherwise known as RSF, who is also commonly known as General Hemeti. So they fought. And for those who do not know why they are fighting, there's a video I made earlier on this channel. You go watch it. I'm going to link it up here so that you can go and watch it and understand the origin of this conflict, the geopolitical powers that are pulling strings in this conflict, and basically understand why they are fighting. And this RCF, basically to summarize, is that is a former militia that was being used by the former dictator to fight or basically crack down on people who are opposing the government, right? And later on, when the dictator al-Bashir was deposed, this RSF became a very powerful paramilitary army, and they were controlling gold mining in Sudan. They are still controlling gold mining in Sudan. And for those who do not know, is that Sudan is among the top 5 countries with the largest gold deposits in the world. And when it comes to gold production, it ranks almost at position 2 in the world. So these RSF militia control that gold mining and exports. And what has been happening is that they have been pushed to return Sudan back to civilian democratic rule. And one of the requirements to do that was to integrate this RSF paramilitary into the regular army. That is one of the requirements before they hold elections. And when the date to do that came up, the RSF started attacking the regular army bases and taking over airports in Sudan. So now you understand. And the result of that 4-5 days of fighting, intense fighting, is that today the capital city Khartoum doesn't have running water, because in the course of the fighting, the pipelines and the water treatment plants were destroyed, most likely intentionally. And they also don't have electricity, because again, in the course of the fighting and bombing, the power transmission facilities were destroyed. So now you understand. And the civilians are caught in between these two fighting armies in Sudan. And beginning on Wednesday, thousands of people have been fleeing the capital, Khartoum. Thousands of people took matters into their own hands and, according to witnesses, began leaving their homes in Khartoum, some in cars and others on foot, including women and children. They said the streets were littered with dead bodies, the stench of which filled the air. So now you understand. It's fighting at a massive scale, the kind of fighting you would imagine in a country that is at war, right? And the United States plans to send an armed assault in Khartoum, not to stop the fighting, not to fight with any side, but to evacuate the more than 80 Americans working or based in the Khartoum American Embassy or the American Embassy in Sudan. So, according to the latest report, is that there have been more than 200 extra special force personnel deployed, or rather arriving at the U.S. base in Djibouti in preparation for this assault in Khartoum for evacuation purposes. Other countries are not even sure what they are going to do because, for example, Kenya had planned to send a plane to Sudan to evacuate the Kenyans in Sudan, in Khartoum. But that is not possible because all airports have been taken over by one of these two armies. So there's no way you can land a plane in Sudan. So the only way is having those nationals leave Khartoum alongside the other civilians and try to either access a neighboring country or to go to the safer towns in Sudan for evacuation.